significant reductions in the cost of government. We don't have a choice. If you just look at our economy, we have a $28 trillion GDP. All right. If you think interest rates are going down, we have to refinance 8+. All right. We came together today because we want to get something accomplished. If you look at the group of people up here, and we are here because we're for things. We're here because we want to get something, make something happen up here. In my case, I've been here 6 years. It's been pretty frustrating to try to get things accomplished. President Trump had a mandate. I just went through my election, and I can just tell you what people were talking about, why they were voting for Donald Trump, and why they voted for Republicans. Number one, they want a secure border. They're fed up. They're fed up with drugs. They're fed up with criminals. They're fed up with terrorists coming across the border. They're fed up with having an open border. Number two, they're fed up with inflation. Now, they probably haven't tied inflation enough to government spending, but to the certain extent they are, and they're expecting Republicans to stop inflation. However we can do it, that's what their expectation is. So we came together to try to come up with how do we get something positive done. Number one, there ought to be probably a two-step process because it's going to take a while to do the things we have to do, extending the Trump tax cuts. So what should we do first? The American public wants right now a secure border. Now, unfortunately, it's going to take a lot of resources, which it wouldn't have taken if the border had never been opened. It wouldn't have taken when I came up here 6 years ago, when government was shut down, if the Democrats had funded what Donald Trump wanted on the border. But now it does. So what do we need? We need money for more Border Patrol agents. We need more money for ICE agents to do the deportations. We need to have money for the wall, money for vessels, money for technology. Things that, just as an example, what is Biden doing by selling off steel that we could use? It's a slap in the face of the American public. So that's number one. We've got to get that done. We've talked to Senator Graham, who's going to run the he'll be the chair of the Budget Committee, and he is absolutely committed to having a border bill done quickly that Donald Trump can sign and will get the border secure. Now, the second bill, there's going to be a lot of things we all want to get accomplished. Number one, we've got to extend the Trump tax cuts. And there's probably a lot of things we can do to improve the tax policy of this country to do what we should be doing. Our tax policy should be doing, how do we make sure we fund our government, but how do we do it in a manner that we create jobs, don't destroy jobs? So there's a lot of opportunities to do that. And I know Senator Johnson and Senator Lee were both involved in that process a few years ago. In our letter, we say we ought to look at least $2.5 trillion worth of savings. Reality is the numbers are going to have to be bigger than that. Let's think about the numbers. We've had a 2% increase in population in the last 5 years, 53% increase in funding. Joe Biden's been president 1.6% of the history of this country. He's responsible for 23% of the entire federal debt. I've been up here 6 years. We've doubled the federal debt from $18 to $36 trillion. This is a problem. Inflation will not go away. Interest rates are not going to come down until we figure out how to start saving money. I know on the House side, the House Budget Committee has significant opportunities for savings. And I know that all of us are going to work diligently to find every dollar of savings we can to make sure we take care of the American public, but also we save money. So let me turn it over to the chairman of the Freedom Caucus, Andy Harris.
Thank you very much, Senator Scott. Look, the president won a mandate on November 5th, and the mandate, just as the senator said, was to deliver on the economy and deliver on the border. The bottom line is that what Congress needs to show the American people that we are 100% behind the president's mandate and the president's policy, and the letter indicates how we think it needs to be done. We do know that extending the tax cuts is incredibly important, but will require some hard decisions to be made on spending reductions in order to control the deficit. But the first thing we need to do coming out of the box is we need to pass an emergency border bill. It has to be passed, obviously, because we don't expect any help from our Democrat colleagues while they're spending their time selling off border wall. We're going to have to actually pass a bill that makes us buy back border wall or buy new border wall because it's being sold off, in addition to all the things Senator Scott said. So we need to go ahead on a bicameral basis. The Republicans need to show we are behind this agenda. We need to deliver on a border bill as soon as we can because the American people expect it, and then we need to immediately turn our attention to improving the economy by making sure that the average American does not get a tax increase, that we deliver on some of the President's promises, like tax on tips, and that we control the growth of the, I should say control the growth of the federal budget, and therefore decrease the federal deficit. So again, this is going to be a bicameral effort. We are fully in support of what the President's agenda is, and this letter indicates how we think Congress ought to proceed. With that, I turn it over to Senator Mike Lee.
In returning President Trump to the White House, the American people could not have been more clear. They want operational control over the border again. They want our country to not be under invasion anymore. They want border security. Our reconciliation proposal today keeps the promise made for Americans. We are going to deliver real border security right up front, and no more kicking the can down the road. And a vital part of that first reconciliation package, which will include border security, we've got a fantastic way of paying for it, of offsetting it through an appropriate mechanism that is tied to our lack of border security. My legislation that will be used as part of the pay for is called the America First Act. What the America First Act does is to stop, get the federal government to stop subsidizing illegal immigration, stop giving federal welfare benefits and other advantages that are supposed to go to U.S. citizens and not to illegal aliens. If we can keep them out of the hands of those who aren't supposed to be here in the first place, we'll save an enormous amount of money. I mean, we're talking about $100 billion, possibly significantly more than that, depending on exactly how the score turns out. Look, for years, we as Americans have been told that we don't need to worry about one thing in particular when there's illegal immigration happening. That don't worry, they're not getting welfare benefits. They're not eligible for them. Well, there are some problems with that. One of the many problems with it, under this administration in particular, is that there are millions of people who have come in here and then have been papered over as if they were legal when in fact they are not, through, among other things, the illegal, unlawful use of a technique known as immigration parole. Immigration parole is there to be used for humanitarian or very specific public use purposes on an individualized basis, person by person, never categorical. And yet what did this administration do? It used the law illegally. Its ultra-virus actions, trying to paper over people who the administration invited and brought into the country unlawfully using immigration parole. Now, in July of this year, the Congressional Budget Office looked at this, trying to assess the overall cost of the open border policy of this administration, those who have come in just the last few years. And what they concluded was that Biden's failure, his adamant refusal, defiantly his refusal to enforce the border, is adding a cost to American taxpayers of about $300 billion over the next 10 years. Of that amount, the CBO identified that most of this was coming in the form of refundable tax credits and Medicaid. But there are other significant sums that also factored into it, including SNAP, child nutrition programs, supplemental security income, Social Security, Medicare, and assistance for higher education, all of which account for some of this additional amount. Look, in order to help President Trump fulfill his promise of restoring operational control of the border and to stop illegal immigration, any border package that we send to President Trump's desk has to include a prohibition on these government benefits going to people who are here unlawfully, who were never supposed to be here to begin with. We can send out all the money in the world to Texas for a border wall, but without a serious effort to stop encouraging more people to immigrate illegally, and without additional incentives, removing the additional incentives that are keeping people here, then we're going to continue to have a problem. So that's why this budget reconciliation bill is a big deal, and why it's going to make a big difference for it, and I look forward to getting it done and getting these sums paid for and offset in the reconciliation bill. We're now going to turn to my friend and colleague from the state where I was born, Andy Biggs.
Thank you, Senator Lee and Senator Scott, for organizing this, and Chairman Harris. Let me tell you what a difference it makes when you have a president who's committed to border security, and the world knows it and takes him seriously. When I was recently on the border, $5,000 per person was the going rate to come across. You know what it is now? It's in excess of $10,000. Why is that? Because we are going to secure the border. Why is it that the Philippine ambassador to the United States has warned Filipino illegal aliens to repatriate to the Philippines? Because he knows we're serious. That's what we're talking about, and we're going through this process. It's a Byzantine process, this budget reconciliation process. But the first thing that we have to do, which is consistent with President Trump's mandate from the American people, because it's our mandate as well, is to make sure we do secure the border. So when we talk about sanctuary cities, what does that mean for sanctuary cities? It means they need to come on board. Because if their law enforcement is arresting someone who's a criminal illegal alien, then that alien is actually safer in the jail. That community is safer, and the ICE agents or the federal police agents are safer. And if a sanctuary city doesn't want to participate, then it's Congress's duty to ensure that they are not benefited by the federal taxpayer subsidizing their program. When we come to the first reconciliation bill, and we're considering what we need to do, we up here have agreed you have to make sure that you put the policies necessary and the resources necessary to implement border security. We saw President Trump was more than capable of doing that, and I'll just give you one statistical data point there. The Yuma sector. The last year under President Donald Trump, about 8,500 people encountered for the whole year, whole fiscal year. You know what it was under this administration? They had weekends, they had days with more than 8,500 people encountered. This administration has brought in record numbers of illegal aliens. And the American people said in November, on November 5th, they said, no more. And we have colleagues across the aisle who don't believe it. We have colleagues in our own party who don't believe that that's the mandate. But it is the mandate, and we're going to do all we can to facilitate adhering to that mandate. And that's the message that I leave. And with that, I turn the microphones over to my friend from Wisconsin, Senator Ron Johnson.
Thank you, Andy. First of all, I want to thank all of my colleagues here on a bicameral basis for attending this press conference. This group of individuals are leaders. There are others, but these are leaders in Congress who realize that it is immoral to mortgage our children's future, and we want to stop that. We also fully realize that Biden's open border policy represents a clear and present danger to America. But this is also a group of people who oftentimes, unfortunately, get scorned because we generally vote no, because the uniparty is mortgaging our children's future. But we are a bicameral group of people who want to be part of the solution, who vote no most of the time, but we want to vote yes. And I don't think Senator Rick Scott or this group has been given near enough credit for, first of all, the tenacity of Senator Scott holding a weekly dinner where we talked about the debt ceiling. None of us had ever voted for an increase in the debt ceiling. We talked for week after week after week. Finally realized, well, the only way we're going to get something for increasing the debt ceiling is if we are willing to support something. So it was the Freedom Caucus that actually had the bill. And then very reasonable negotiation with their other House members to propose something that, unfortunately, Speaker McCarthy kind of frittered away that proposal. But anyway, we are here about solutions. And that is why we want to be very public that we support the two reconciliation bill solutions, starting out with a very rapid passage of something that provides President Trump the resources he needs to honor the promise he made to Americans, that the Americans support overwhelming margins to secure our border. But also being the accountant of this group, I have to provide a chart. Senator Scott talked about the fact that our population since 2019 has increased 2%, but spending is up over 50%. And this chart basically represents that. But I think what's notable about this, I put a baseline. If we would have grown our spending by a reasonable baseline of population growth, even with high Biden inflation, we would have gone from about $4.4 trillion in spending in 2019, and instead of spending almost $7 trillion this last fiscal year, we would have been spending about 5.7. The difference of spending above that reasonable baseline, and again, how can anybody dispute that it'd be reasonable to grow federal spending by population growth plus inflation, particularly when we're at $36 trillion in debt? The amount of spending over that reasonable baseline represents $8.8 trillion. We further mortgage our children's future. One final note. One of the techniques of the Uniparty in massively increasing spending is they've transferred discretionary spending into mandatory. I think that's, again, it's off budget. We don't appropriate that. It's just spending that occurs automatically. But most people, when they hear mandatory spending, think of Social Security. They think of Medicare or even Medicaid. The reality is, because of the actions of the Uniparty, since 2019, we've increased other mandatory spending. Again, not Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, by about the same amount as we increased those three programs. Those programs have increased about $700 billion. Other mandatory spending has increased by $680 billion per year. Again, off the books. You can't touch it other than in reconciliation. And so when Senator Scott talks about $2.5 trillion as being a minimum level that we need to cut spending in our reconciliation package, I'm saying we've got about a $6.8 trillion pool of 10-year money that we should be evaluating for dramatically reducing the size and scope of government. Because when government grows, our freedoms necessarily recede. And I say that's the other value we all hold. We think government is here to jealously guard our freedom, not cause and exacerbate more problems and mortgage our children's future. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Congressman Ralph Norman.
Thanks, Senator Johnson. I want to thank all the patriots behind me. Ladies and gentlemen, these are people who are willing to put their vote on the line for all the public to see and to solve a problem that the American people voted on November 5th, which is to seal the border, to stop the insanity that was deliberately done by Joe Biden. He did it to get a power base in his mind that would solidify his party in power forever. Guess what? It didn't work. It's not going to work now. And we agree 100%. Senator Lee, the pay-fors, we've got to have. I wish we had them in our continuing resolution that we're voting on today, which is insanity at best. Senator Scott, you mentioned $2 trillion, not near enough. We have a math problem. If we owe $36 trillion, how does cutting $2 trillion really make a dent? It's a teardrop in the ocean. So it's going to take some serious cuts, some serious readjustments, some serious votes that everybody behind me is willing to take. And we are so excited about this new administration. We're so excited about the first tranche, hopefully, in the reconciliation of Border Patrol agents, funding for putting Tom Homan in a position which there could not be a better man to enforce what he says about deportation and getting this border secure. I'm excited about it. I'm excited about the tax cuts, hopefully on the second tranche that will extend what President Trump did that was so successful. And it's a great day in America, but it's going to take some courage that every one of these people behind me have, and we have got the plan that we're going to put out, and hopefully the American people will see what we're doing and have an up or down vote on it. So thank you for covering this, and I would like to call on my good friend, Clay Higgins.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the senators and my colleagues from the House from organizing this. The House Freedom Caucus is my colleagues, the most conservative amongst us in the House. We're proud to stand with these senators who commonly find themselves alone on the front line in this chamber. So standing before you today, the most conservative members of the House and the Senate, and we are together to support a two-step reconciliation strategy. America must understand that reconciliation as a process is a unique opportunity to avoid the Senate's filibuster during the annual congressional budget process. This is our opportunity to reset our spending, to change the trajectory of spending, to reflect the priorities of the American people, and to advance conservative policy wins. President Trump was resoundingly elected by the American people, and the incoming administration must be provided with the proper resources to accomplish real change beginning in January. The American people clearly demand that we stop the arterial bleed at our border and finally build the wall and develop the assets necessary, funding the necessary manpower to enforce the laws that we already have on the books. We understand that necessary tax simplification and reform will come later to ensure that the cost of living for working families is reduced. Promises made, promises kept was a constant and admired theme of the first Trump administration. With this plan, we'll set up President Trump to do it again from day one in his next term. I thank the senators and my colleagues from the House for allowing me to speak today, and I'm honored to introduce the next, Scott Perry. Where's the general? There he is. There's my general right there.
Well, thanks, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, credit goes to Rick, Mike, Ron, the senators that stand on the front line, of course, our chairman, Freedom Caucus, Andy Harris. This is to show you and the American people that Republicans have a plan to realize and to make sure that not only President Trump's mandate, but America's wishes are fulfilled, and that they can be fulfilled quickly and completely. And so we're set on getting the border stuff done almost immediately, and it's going to be paid for correctly, and then we'll move on to the probably more complicated issue of making sure that people don't have to pay more in taxes than they should, and they don't have to pay more for the goods and services that they currently can't afford under a Biden administration. But the point is this plan has been put together with the great people up on this stage and others, but mostly led by Senator Scott and Andy Harris, and Republicans have a plan to make sure that President Trump's mandate, America's wishes, are fulfilled. Thank you all.
Any of us can answer any questions that anybody has. Yes.
The CR was brought up a few times. We'll start there. Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, even some senators are now posting on X saying that they should not take up this bill. The House, it sounds like, could vote on it today. You all don't usually vote for CRs. So what is your message to Speaker Johnson, and why do you think he put a product up like this out there?
Over 1,500 pages, all right? The bills that never seen the light of day. None of us knew what was in them. People are expected to vote on them very quickly. More regulation. I mean, just wasteful spending. No pay-fors, right? It makes no sense. This is we won the election. This has got to change. And people act like, oh, you can't balance a budget. So I balanced the budget when I was governor. I walked in a budget deficit. You do it by looking at everything you spend money on. Look at every line in the budget. Look at all the regulations. You can cut 20% of regulations. I'm very appreciative of what Elon Musk is doing and Vivek Ramaswamy, because we can do it. It's all doable. So I don't know. You probably want to talk about that.
Let me just comment. Look, the American people don't send their representatives to Washington to vote on a 1,500-page bill in less than 24 hours that spends $110 billion, adds $110 billion to the deficit, without the opportunity to offer an amendment to perhaps pay for this bill. The process is broken. I think that Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk recognize that if they are empowered to somehow reduce government spending and reduce our deficit, because as Elon Musk says, deficit equals inflation. That's the bottom line. When we do deficit spending, we're printing money, we are causing inflation. How are we going to change that if one of the actions we take after November 5th is to take a vote on a bill that's $110 billion, a direct addition to our deficit and our debt, without even a vote on a pay-for? We have to change business, the way business is done in Washington. Look, Unfortunately, it does look like we're probably going to vote on this today. I don't know. They're whipping the votes over in the House to see if they have the votes to pass this. I think most Americans would view this as exactly what they think is wrong with
Do
Washington.
you have confidence in Speaker Johnson staying on then?
Well, I don't know. I'm only one vote out of 220. Look, I think the Speaker could have handled this differently. At this point, I'm still supportive of the Speaker, but I will tell you that voices both inside the House Freedom Caucus and outside the Freedom Caucus have been very disappointed at what's happened this week.
Anybody else want to say anything about the CR?
No, I'll just quickly say it's like Chairman Harris said, it's the way it was done. Not going through a rule, not letting us vote individually. And guess what was hidden in there? And I'm still livid about this. Pay raises for us. How does that square? What return on investment have we given the people of America other than $37 trillion in debt? It makes no sense. And have no pay for us? How does that work? No family or business would do that. And no family or business, as has been mentioned, how do you read? A speed reader can't read 1,547 pages in less than 24 hours. It's insanity. Now, the next question is, what are you going to do? Friday at 12 o'clock, the budget. I mean, that's when the shutdown. Well, look, it is what it is, and we got to face it. But rather than saddle each one of you young people with more and more debt, it's insanity, and it flies in the face of the Doge Commission. That's what everybody's excited about. Yet here we do this. Makes no sense.
We need to realize that since November the 5th, since we got this mandate for President Trump, the House, if we pass this bill with $110 billion, we will have passed more than $300 billion in additional spending since November the 5th. That's the trajectory that we have got to stop. Thank you.
What else? Yes, sir.
Democrats found out how hard it was to do immigration policy changes because of the Byrd Rule previously. How are you guys going to get around, or is there a way to get around objections to immigration policies that would be birded out?
So, well, first off, if you look at what we're talking about spending and having pay fors. That's what we're talking about doing. So we're not doing what the Democrats are trying to do is completely change the immigration policy of the country. I think it's not, it doesn't violate the Byrd Rule if you secure the border and you pay for it. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything. Okay. Yes.
I just want to put a finer point on this. Does everyone here have the prerequisite that you need $2.5 trillion at least of spending cuts, the elimination of the green credits in order to vote for the Trump tax cuts in the second reconciliation bill?
I don't think that's the way we look at it. They're examples, but I think everybody up here probably expects to get more.
But keep in mind, though, this is not that bill. We're talking about a different reconciliation bill, one that's likely to come up toward the beginning of the year. We don't expect the tax bill to come until a few months later.
Let me also add, the way you ought to look at what's going to happen in 26 is a massive automatic tax increase. Now, I think most Republicans will do everything we can to avoid a massive $4 trillion plus tax increase. Now, from my standpoint, as we do that, I think somebody else mentioned simplification. I'd like to simplify and rationalize the tax code. That's going to take a longer period of time. But, there's some people arguing, well, you have to combine border security with that in order to get it passed. I think there's a great deal of pressure right there preventing that massive tax increase on the American economy. That would be completely counterproductive. It'd actually, in the end, increase deficits because it'll do so much economic harm. So again, avoiding a massive tax increase is what that's our top priority, really, once we get past securing the border.
I think we'll take one more question. Yeah.
Senator Crapo has suggested maybe the tact, especially for this tax part of the reconciliation, bill process, using a current policy baseline rather than a current law baseline. How does that fit into your objective about, reducing deficits and, pay fors when that would set the baseline of the TCJ?
Well, I think it's two different issues. One issue is as Senator Johnson says, we've got to stop these massive tax increases, and using policy is a logical way of doing that. There's also opportunities to simplify the tax code, but on top of that, everybody up here, we expect significant reductions in the cost of government. We don't have a choice. If you just look at our economy, we have a $28 trillion GDP. All right. If you think interest rates are going down, we have to refinance $8+ trillion of treasuries a year. Plus, we're losing $2 trillion a year. We have got to get to a balanced budget. Now, are we going to get there in 1 year? I could. I did it as governor. I did every year as governor. Everybody up here could probably do that. So we have to work with our colleagues to get there.
I have to chime in on this one, sorry. What we do right now with spending policy that ends is we extend that policy based on current policy. It's only tax policy that ends. So again, everything in the way our rules are written favors increasing spending and disfavors tax cuts. So we're just going to equalize that treatment. If we treat spending policies that end and we're going to extend those based on current policy, so there's no score to doing that. There shouldn't be a score when we just continue current tax policy and prevent a massive tax increase. So again, we're just trying to equalize that treatment. It's totally within the jurisdiction of the Budget Committee. I serve on that. I think Chairman Graham hopefully will be supportive of that as well. It just makes common sense.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Keep going. I'm going to
We're trying to get that on tax.
we actually don't.
We did.
Another press conference.